The power of a statistical test. When we draw a conclusion from a significance test, we hope our conclusion will be correct, but sometimes it will be wrong. There are two types of mistakes that we can make. If we reject the null hypothesis H sub naught when H sub naught is true, we have committed a type 1 error. That means, for example, if you look at a normal distribution and we are at a 5% significance level, then 5% of the time, even though the null hypothesis may be true, we're going to reject it 1 time out of 20. That's 5%. So that's the probability of a type 1 error is 5%. The other error we can make is if we fail to reject the null hypothesis, when in fact the null hypothesis is false, we have committed a type 2 error. So here's a summary of that. So across the top you have the truth about the population. So when a null hypothesis is true versus the null hypothesis is false. So if you reject the null hypothesis, when in fact the null hypothesis is true, you've made a type 1 error. On the other hand, if you reject the null hypothesis, when in fact the null hypothesis is false, that's what you should do, then you've made the correct conclusion. The other type of error, when you fail to reject the null hypothesis, when the null hypothesis is true, you shouldn't reject it if it's true, then you've made the correct conclusion. But if you fail to reject the null hypothesis, when in fact the null hypothesis is false, you've made a type 2 error. So the probability of a type 1 error, that is, if you reject the null hypothesis when in fact the null hypothesis